Hi, my name's Kathleen. I'm in the recruitment business. I'm looking for people who think differently than ordinary people, much like Steve Jobs, who said, I'm looking for someone who looks at a red moon and sees a different kind of planet, listens to a tune and thinks about a song that hasn't been written. Those misfits that don't fit in square pegs that don't fit in round holes. He looked for these people because he said they were the ones that were crazy enough to change the world, and those were the ones that actually could do that. So I'm in the recruitment business. I want people like that who look at problems in a very different way. Those who didn't have the innovation bred out of them. When we're all little kids, we try everything. We eat mud pies, we build tree houses, we combine things. I can remember having a chemistry set and thinking I was going to cure cancer. Wasn't quite sure how, but I was going to put all these kinds of things together and write complicated formulas, and at 7 years old, I knew that I was going to change the world. And I continue to try to do that. I run something called Crafty Bastards. It's a process where we bring together the visceral nature of earned experience. It's kind of like phenomenology. How did you earn the experience? Well, usually you earn it through the school of hard knocks, that nitty-gritty, visceral experience that taught you something. You didn't learn it in a book. You learned it, I call it street craft. You learned it on the street. We combine that with the analytic rigor in the intelligence community. The term is tradecraft. It teaches you how to think in a very logical and sometimes an illogical way. How can you look at opinions that are different than yours and accept them as maybe something that will change your optic, change the way you look at a problem set? I put those together because I was frustrated with some of the national level efforts that looked at problems in a very linear way. And they weren't necessarily challenged. In fact, some of those problem sets and games, when I talk about games, I'm speaking about war games and games that first responder communities do to really practice. And in some senses, the outcomes are predictable. What we're looking for is to change that equation at the end, take the advantage away from an adversary and think as an adversary would about how to challenge a system. Again, the bureaucratic processes, although wonderful, sometimes are so strong and so procedural, they have bred out the innovation, the risk-taking, the kinds of things which are the exact ingredients you need to tackle a problem. So Crafty Bastards was born. I had a principal deputy at the Department of Defense say to me one day, Kathleen, we need more of your friends to come into these kinds of interactions. And I said, sir, okay. What friends are those? He said, you know, those cops and robbers and malcontents and pickpockets and authors and musicians and drug dealers and all the kinds of people you've interacted with your entire career. He said, I've listened to those stories about who taught you what and how you learned that lesson and how you combined it with something else you knew and used that to do an interview, pursue an investigation, solve a hard problem. He says, bring them to the game and let's see if the tempo in the game changes. And you know what? It did. Changed considerably because if you're interacting, I'll give you an example of all law enforcement officers, they think in a certain kind of way. And we want them to. I was one, I get that. You're going to go through an academy, you're going to learn about law and procedure, and you're going to be physically fit and mentally sound, and you're going to follow all of the rules until you get out on the street and you realize the rules don't apply. Same thing in the military academy. You want to learn doctrine and you want to practice that doctrine. It changes the point at the end of the spear, but you stay within a doctrinal mindset. And if you combine folks that think a little bit differently, that don't operate in a national security or homeland security environment, they're not encumbered by badges on lanyards. They operate in a different world. They operate in the gaming world, for instance. They operate in the criminal world. They operate for profit where the government does not. Can you take some of these folks, put them together with folks in the military, law enforcement, intelligence business, and collaboratively solve a problem? We tried it, and guess what it did? So we built a business around that. And we solved some hard problems for the government and for the private sector, frankly, mostly for the government. So taking the Crafty Bastard methodological approach to Huntsville was natural to me. Here are where the warfighters are, the inventors, the entrepreneurs, the ones that are kind of outside the lines, and they've chosen to come to Huntsville because it's such a rich environment for so many reasons. It's away from the craziness of Washington, D.C. You have the time to think and time to explore and time to discover, time to evaluate and combine and sometimes recombine capabilities and see what comes out the other end. When you're in the discovery process constantly, you have an opportunity to learn at every part of that process.